Trains will always have a very special place in my heart. I've loved passenger trains since I was a real fan about yay big. I started out loving the New River excursion trains and I graduated to Amtrak. Then I started graduating to Freight Railroad, Chesapeake and Ohio, eventually CSX, Norfolk Southern, Union Pacific, and the like. But passenger trains have always held a very special place in my heart. And it's partly for that reason and partly because Thanksgiving is the most traveled holiday of the year, even beating out Christmas, that I thought it would be a perfect time to look at passenger trains. Mostly here in West Virginia, but there's one shot in Virginia because I think it's a cool shot and it's a passenger train, so we're going with it. We'll take a look at our daily, or 3 days a week, Cardinal here on the New River. We'll take a look at the Capital Limited, which is no longer in existence. They got merged with the Silver Star to create a Chicago to Miami Floridian, although that will eventually come back to being two separate trains. There's a reason for that. I'm not going to get into it, but there's a reason. It's temporary. No need to fret if you love the Capital Limited. And we'll also take a look at what I think is one of the most interesting and unique trains that you've ever seen. I've never seen anything like it. I knew about it, but I hadn't seen it, and I guarantee you haven't either. Or rather, I guarantee there is a likelihood you haven't seen it because not only it's a very special train, we'll get into it in just a second, but I never say never. There's always a chance some of you out there have seen it. So without further ado, let's get going and let's celebrate the passenger train. Our first shot is in the capital city of West Virginia, Charleston. This is as far west as we'll go, and we'll see several shots of trains as we make our way eastward. We're waiting on Amtrak train number 51, the westbound Cardinal, on a cold night in the capital city. Leading the train tonight is Amtrak number 331, an ALC 42 charger locomotive built in 2021 as part of a 125-unit order which will see Amtrak phase out its aging P42 DC diesels on long-distance trains like this. We'll see some of those old girls later on. Our next shot is in Montgomery in December 2023. Again, it's cold, and again, we're waiting on train number 51, and yet again, it has a charger on it. This one is different, though. It's a heritage unit painted not to honor a predecessor era, but the beginning of Amtrak. It's painted in what we call the Day 1 scheme. When Amtrak took over passenger service in this country in May 1971, it acquired equipment from the individual railroads that had bought into the service. They didn't have anything with an Amtrak logo on it, so for a press event, they painted X-Penn Central number 4316 into this paint scheme, and thus became the Day 1 paint scheme. not familiar with that, because there's an appropriations bill that Congress managed to put through money to study and then make spending. Now here's a cool train. It's actually two trains in one. In August 2023, Norfolk Southern experienced computer problems that essentially ground their railroad to a halt and prevented the Lakeshore Limited from running its route from Chicago to New York and Boston. So what do you do with that extra equipment sitting around in Chicago if you're Amtrak? Well, you need it on the East Coast and you have a train in the Cardinal that runs to the East Coast. Okay, we'll combine the two trains and send it east, and that's exactly what they did. And what resulted was the longest non-excursion passenger train I can ever remember through here. Moving on to Thurmond, and we have a very rare occurrence happening in May 2023, with 3 private cars on the rear of Amtrak 50 eastbound. Private cars are older passenger cars owned by individuals or companies, and as long as they are deemed safe to travel, Amtrak will haul them for a fee, charged by mile. Today we have the Boston and Maine Salisbury Beach, built in 1954 by Pullman, the Pennsylvania Railroad Colonial Crafts, another Pullman product, this time from 1949, and the oldest of the bunch, Norfolk and Western Lambert's Point, built in 1914, again by Pullman. In doing some research on these cars, I found the Colonial Crafts was used by Richard Nixon during the 1960 campaign, and Elvis Presley used the car from New Jersey back to Memphis after his time overseas in the service. The Salisbury Beach and the Lambert's Point were sold to the Reading and Northern Railroad in January 2024 to be used on that road's excursion trains. While we're on the topic of old stuff, the lead locomotive here in this train is a P-42. Amtrak number 22 was built in October 1996. Prince, West Virginia is about the last place you'd ever expect a railroad to believe would need a nice and shiny new station. But in 1946, the C&O believed just that, and it built the handsome structure you see today. It replaced a much smaller station built in the late 19-teens. The station was to be built alongside the inauguration of a train that never ran. The train was to be called the Chessie, a daylight streamliner from Washington, D.C. to Cincinnati. New stations were to be built in Charleston, Alderson, and Waynesboro, Virginia. Of these, only Prince was actually built. In the post-war years, railroads began buying new cars to replace their tired fleets that had been used so much during the war. C&O tried to get ahead of this by placing its order for Chessie cars in 1944, but because of the backlog didn't get them until 48, by which time they could not justify inaugurating a new train. They did run one test run of the Chessie, but it never made a single revenue run. The most notable and certainly cutest feature of the station here at Prince is this image of Chessie on the station floor. On the back wall is a mural depicting coal action on the Piney Creek subdivision, which conveniently connects to the main line right here in Prince. The Piney Creek branch was what got C&O into Beckley. No doubt this fact helped give Prince the largest passenger counts between Charleston and Clifton Forge quite regularly, with patrons not only arriving by car but taking the local passenger train, which actually started its run a mile east in Quinnamont until the train was discontinued in 1950. It's just a few days before Christmas 2021 and we're down here waiting for Amtrak 50, the eastbound Cardinal. A lot of people are getting on the train today, no doubt trying to get to their destination before the holiday starts. Not only did we get the train, we also got what I think might be one of the coolest things I've ever had the fortune to catch, a boarding call. Prince, again, is the least likely place you'd ever think to have a boarding call for its trains, but it does. All of a sudden, this small town station in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia, has the same thing echoing through it that you would find in a Union Station in New York or Chicago or wherever. It really was cool to listen to. Listen to this.
This is the last call for Amtrak Cardinal Train 50, en route to New York, with intermediate stops. Passengers should proceed to track 1. Please remove any travel documents from their envelope and have them ready for scanning by the conductor. Thank you for choosing Amtrak.
CSX equipment defect detector. Milepost 311.8. Track 1. CSX equipment defect detector. Milepost 311.8. Track 1.
Moving on to White Sulphur Springs, and we find westbound Amtrak 51 coming in for its station stop right across the street from the Greenbrier Resort. Just to the left of our shot here is a relic of the past that I'll bet you've probably seen if you've come to the Greenbrier at least once. At first glance, you might think these tracks have no business being in the parking lot here. What you may not know is that these tracks are still used by CSX to this day, although less frequently than back in the C&O era. What happened was, due to the timing of some C&O trains, they often arrived here in White Sulphur fairly late at night, and to avoid disturbing passengers and avoid having them check into the hotel in their pajamas, they simply parked sleeping cars here in this siding until morning, at which point someone from the Greenbrier would come in and take them to the hotel to check in. Today, CSX still uses these tracks to park maintenance of way equipment in, and also park their office car train here when they meet with coal company executives at the Greenbrier.
Conductor, engineer, station 5, crew 105 and 137, west of 1, clear to the west of the White Sulphur, clear WS. We're departing with 30 seconds. ALS NWS on 1 to the District 510.
This is the C&O Railway Heritage Center in Clifton Forge, Virginia. We're waiting on the eastbound Cardinal 15. I thought this would be a great shot with a coal train in the yard and a historic C&O locomotive in the frame as well. I view the Cardinal as continuing the C&O passenger tradition just as CSX does on the freight side. So to me, I had to get all this together in one shot. The Cardinal is actually a combination of two trains from the pre-Amtrak era. The New York Central's James Whitcomb Riley, an all-coach train from Chicago to Cincinnati via Indianapolis, and the Chesapeake and Ohio's premier passenger train, the George Washington. The George, as it was called, was the pride of the C&O passenger stable. It was inaugurated in 1932 to honor the 200th birthday of the first president and ran from Washington, D.C. to Cincinnati, with a section to Louisville and a section from Newport News, Virginia that joined the main train at Charlottesville, Virginia. It stayed on C&O timetables until the end of passenger service in May 1971. In November 1971, it was combined with the Riley under Amtrak operation, and the combined eastbound train used the George Washington name until 1974. The Cardinal name we know first came on the scene in 1977. What was the C&O doing naming trains after presidents? Well, the C&O called itself George Washington's Railroad, and while the connection is very much indirect, it is interesting. In 1785, General Washington led the charge to construct a canal from western Virginia to the Ohio River. The project started in Richmond and only got about 7 miles during his lifetime out to western Virginia. In 1835, the project was picked up again as the original James River Company was reincorporated as the James River and Kanawha Canal Company. By 1851, the canal had reached Buchanan, Virginia, and that was as far as it got due to the railroads providing competition now. The old canal path was then sold to the Richmond and Allegheny Railroad. Construction for that began in 1880. The next year, R&A completed its 230-mile line between Clifton Forge and Richmond. After all that, the R&A fell into receivership in 1883 and was bought by C&O in 1890. Through this acquisition, C&O gained a low-grade route into Richmond and a very indirect tie to our first president. We're in the eastern panhandle now for a shot of the westbound Capital Limited at Martinsburg. While Martinsburg is well known today for the dominance of the high school football team, it also has historical significance right here at the station. Right next to the station here is the historic B&O Shops and Roundhouse. Martinsburg was the main locomotive facility between Baltimore and Cumberland, Maryland, and thus was a very important place on the B&O. During the Civil War, the shops and roundhouse were burned by the Confederacy. After the war, B&O rebuilt, and the building you see today was part of that rebuild. All was not quiet after the war, though, as the workers here in Martinsburg would spark what became known as the Great Strike. In 1877, the economy was not great, and so B&O, along with other major railroads, announced a 10% wage cut, and this, as you can imagine, did not sit well with employees. After a work stoppage by their colleagues in Baltimore was aborted, workers here in Martinsburg stopped working in July 1877. A demonstration was held here at the depot, and this prompted then West Virginia Governor Henry Matthews to send in the state militia to restore order. That did not work. On the morning of July 17th, Mr. William Vandergrift, a striking fireman, lost his life at the hands of the militia while trying to stop a train from leaving the station. This was the spark that lit the Great Strike, and within 2 weeks, 10,000 workers across the country were on strike.
I was there too when that opened. How about that? 1976, yeah. In 77, I graduated.
Now for that special train I was telling you about. This is Auto Train. What's Auto Train? It's a special train where you can actually take your car with you when you ride the train. It only serves 2 stations, Stanford, Florida outside Orlando, and Norton, Virginia outside DC. This is a service that has actually been around since the 70s. It was a private operation before Amtrak took it over and has been running it ever since. It's just the pride of Amtrak's fleet. You do not hold up Auto Train. And we were so lucky enough to catch it in Ashland, Virginia. So that's the Auto Train. Ashland, Virginia is about 14 miles north of Richmond and is an Amtrak hotspot, with long-distance and Northeast regional commuter trains rolling through here every day. There is only one train they call Big Daddy, though. Auto Train. Just sit back and watch Big Daddy rolling on the high iron south for Florida. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to learn more about the goings on here at the New River Network, we invite you to like our Facebook page. You can also watch our broadcast there too. Speaking of watching our broadcast, you can check us out on YouTube as well. We invite you to subscribe to our channel. You can find us on Roku. Just search up New River Network. You'll be sure to find it. WatchNRN.com, brand spanking new website, looks great. And you can check us out on cable as well in Fayette County. Channel 4 in the Plateau, Channel 17 down in the Valley. So, for the New River Network,